Hello and welcome back, everybody, to Cinematic Universe. My name is Ernesto Martinez, and we are doing another special T review. Not just one, not two, but six of them. Star Wars: The Road to the Force Awakens starts here. And joining me, as always, is Catherine Cook. How are you, Catherine?
All right.
All right. So let's talk about the prequels. The very lovely, very unappreciated prequels. I'll let you start this off. Phantom
Well,
Menace.
the thing that I liked about the original Star Wars more than any of the other films is that it's built on rising tension. The situation gets worse and bigger, one thing after another, and Phantom Menace did that for the first half hour because you go from, some Jedi are supposed to be, having a negotiation with some trade viceroy, and all of a sudden their ship gets destroyed. Then there's trying to be killed by battle droids, and there's a planetary invasion. The Queen's in danger. There's people being sent off to concentration camps. You have all this shit happening, and it's like, man, this thing is really hitting the ground running. And yet after that first half hour, it's like, okay, we're going to be stuck in the desert for the next 50 minutes, basically because we ran out of gas. And it's like the movie just stops dead in its tracks. That's not even getting into the can of worms that is Jar Jar Binks. It's just, you can't do that. You don't build up that amount of tension and all that stuff to just have yourself parked in the desert for like nearly an hour and with your badass villain Darth Maul. Granted, he was advertised as pretty much the type of character like Sanjuro from Yojimbo type, those Kurosawa movies, the lone samurai warrior type thing. Granted, he lived up to that, but he didn't really do anything on Tatooine the entire time. He's just kind of standing around. So there's no tension whatsoever there, and this movie goes on for like 50 minutes with this kid who's just the antithesis of what you would expect a young Darth Vader to be. It's setting him up for being like a little whiny brat later on who doesn't get his way, which is basically what happens. But and then after that, when they go to Coruscant, it's like, okay, we're going to be in the capital city for 15 minutes of this next part of the movie where nothing is going to be accomplished. Bureaucrats will be bureaucrats, including the Jedi Council, and we're not going to accomplish a damn thing but to send us all the way back to where we started. And essentially, what that all amounts to is a huge 70-minute chunk in the middle of your movie where nothing's happening, and it's just boring dialogue. And yeah, the pod race sequence is pretty awesome. That's like the redeeming factor of that entire segment. But when you come back for the climax, it's like you're not really feeling like you're that invested in it because, again, they didn't spend much time talking about everything that happened. You were there for the first half hour with those characters, and then you just depart for 70 minutes. And it's like, okay, we're climax mode. Let's have the big fight. And then the redeeming quality of that finale, of course, was Darth Maul, Duel of the Fates. Still my favorite lightsaber duel throughout the saga, hands down. But yeah, I didn't mind the whole plot about, Trade Federation, trade routes being, whatever the hell that was about, because the second Darth Sidious popped up on the hologram, that basically told me that, okay, it doesn't matter what the opening crawl said, the important thing to take from this is that he is using them for something. And of course, we get what that is by the end of the movie. He wants to be, Chancellor, King of the Universe. So basically, all this movie accomplishes is putting Palpatine in the Supreme Chancellor's chair and bringing Anakin along for the ride. And they did it in such a sloppy, haphazard way. And yeah, there's tons of digital shit, but it's like, it's not, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. I mean, it feels a little bit like it, but it's just dead. It's too, you can't start out a movie with that type of tension, that setup, and then kill it from the middle of the movie and, flatline it for that long of a time. It doesn't work.
And that's Phantom Menace, everybody. Thank you all for listening. We're going to go now to the Clone Wars. Oh, man. I remember the first time the Phantom Menace came out. It was, wow, they're making another Star Wars movie. I can't remember when was it that they started numbering the movies. As soon as they announced Episode 1, and they numbered 4, 5, and 6. Is that how it worked?
No, when Empire Strikes Back came out.
They numbered it.
Yeah, because he was originally going to put Episode 4 on the original Star Wars, and the studio wouldn't let him because he thought it would confuse people. And then when he came out with Empire, he said, "Look, I'm doing this," and then I guess people just kind of accepted it.
Okay, all right. I just never really pinpoint when exactly the numbering started. I just always assumed it was like a thing you do in cinema. You do things backwards, and then you do things frontwards. Man, the hype was all around Phantom Menace, and I remember when I saw it, I thought it was one of the greatest things ever. Then seeing the prequels, as you get older, with everything you know about, storytelling, the mythology, and of course, it's impossible not to compare it to the original trilogy. Yeah, the movies don't really hold up. I mean, they still have some good things about them. It's just that everything that happens, and especially starting with Phantom Menace, sounds good on paper, but the execution, that's where it really starts going down. And that's the thing with George Lucas. It feels like since Phantom Menace, then the next two movies, nobody wanted to tell him no. It was all yes men. Yeah, you want this? Okay, you want to do that? Of course. Do that, do this, do that, do that. And this was around the time where George Lucas was bitching about celluloid and he wanted to go to digital so that he can make the movies the way he wanted to do. So,
Yeah, the first one, Phantom Menace, was actually going to be on digital as well, but they didn't have the cameras ready in time.
yeah. So it was a whole film revolution when this movie was coming out. So a lot of good and a lot of bad happened around the starting of this saga. But I'm kind of getting a little bit out of the topic here. The movie. There's a reason why The Lord of the Rings, while it was being released around the same time that these movies were being released, at least when back in the movie web days, every time I reviewed at least the first two Lord of the Rings movies, there's a reason why I always said that I always found these movies to be my Star Wars. Because the Lord of the Rings had the soul, they had the passion, they had a storytelling technique that just hooked you, that it made you believe in universes like this, mythologies. And that was the thing that the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith were lacking. And that's why I always tell people, yeah, the Lord of the Rings, they were my Star Wars. Because growing up with those movies, I actually felt the connection that people felt with the original trilogy, but just not with Star Wars. And then you have a pretty good cast here. You have Liam Neeson, you have Ewan McGregor, you have Natalie Portman, you have Ian McDiarmid. Great, a pretty good cast. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, what's to complain here? You even have the original voice of C-3PO. Um, you have Terrence Stamp. I mean, for whatever little he's on screen, it's still freaking Terrence Stamp. Of course, you have John Williams' score, and then you also have what was you have Samuel L. Jackson, which at the time I didn't really put too much attention, but to this day I'm just like, wow, Samuel L. Jackson, Mister Fuck You Motherfucker, in a Star Wars movie, and Ray Park, yeah. Then you have Ray Park as Darth Maul, which as far as I can remember, the original initial advertisement for Phantom Menace, he was being sold as this is the new Sith guy, this is the new Dark Lord of the Sith.
This is the new Darth Vader.
This is the new Darth Vader. And he had a very cool design. And I remember being in that theater, and when you said, oh, okay, so he's just going to take both of them on, and he pulls out the double-bladed lightsaber, and you're just like, oh, shit! Original trilogy, good versus evil. There's your story. Prequels, politics and trade disputes. That's what usually the prequels are for, just trade, and none of it is interesting. It's all just a lot of talking and nothing really sustaining anybody's attention. The acting, for however good the actors are, the dialogue is just not working. Some of the actors don't even look like they have any life to the way they talk, especially when you see the impersonating woman, like the decoy playing the Queen Amidala, and you have Padmé before she reveals herself as Padmé.
It's Keira Knightley, by the way.
Yeah, who was Keira Knightley, and she's like, "You're very brave, my queen," and she says, and she delivers it in the most deadpan, lifeless way possible. And it's like, God damn it, it's a freaking headache. Then you have the side plot with as you say, the can of worms that is Jar Jar Binks. Man, I really don't know what went through George Lucas' mind when he created Jar Jar. It's like, oh no, Jar Jar's gonna be it. He's gonna be the new Chewbacca. He's gonna be the new R2D2. Fuck no. Every time he was on screen, I'm just like, stick him out, get him away. And visually speaking, these movies don't hold up. At least, I mean, I was playing. I don't have the Blu-ray versions of the prequel. I was playing the original DVDs that came out at the time, and I'm trying to play these DVDs on the Blu-ray. So it's it's not really gonna look that good, and it really doesn't look good. Jar Jar just looks like a very cheap, rushed visual effects, everything looks very cheap. You can tell where all the green screen is.
Well, the downside of prequels in general is that they have all of these story responsibilities to help set up future films.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many more interesting ways you could have done that, because Phantom Menace seems like just such an empty installment, because, like, again, you only have those two little things being accomplished. Here's Anakin, here's Palpatine. And the rest of it is like, come on, this is the best you could come up with. Yeah. And people, even George admits that he's not that great of a writer and not an actor's director. So it's like, then get somebody to help you out, man.
Yeah, yeah, he did direct the first movie, but that's because nobody had any faith in the movie, and they were just giving him, oh, here's a modest budget at the time. It looks modest, but really that was a really big budget, at least for them. And
that's fine, because the first movie the original film was just like an adventure movie with one episodic setup after another. Because he wouldn't, I'm certain that if he were to have directed Empire, it wouldn't have been nearly as good, because it's so much more depth with the characters and such. But Episode 1, it had that opportunity, and he just kind of flushed it.
Yeah, and it really shows when he says that, look, I'm not really an actor's director, and I'm not really that good of a writer. I mean, just last year, they released the original screenplay for Star Wars that the studio had forced him to rewrite, which became A New Hope. And when you're reading that, I'm just like, wow, look at all these changes. Darth Vader isn't wearing a mask. Anakin Skywalker is an older person. Luke Skywalker is in the same picture. I mean, you can clearly see why they told him for A New Hope that he really needed to do a complete rewrite of the initial draft. And it really shows in this movie. I mean, the dialogue is just not there. And it really shows that he's not an actor's director. Even with Liam Neeson, which I love Qui-Gon Jinn, I really do. But it's just like, Qui-Gon is just always like either one emotion or nothing at all.
Yeah, the character should have resonated a lot more than he did.
Yeah, and you can tell that Qui-Gon Jinn, however the execution was, when he first meets Jar Jar, he's just like, no, fuck no, I am not gonna deal with a character like this. Hell no. And then the script was telling him, yeah, you're gonna be stuck with this guy for the next hour and a half, and then 2 more movies. And you're just like, fine, okay. I will find you and I will kill you, so says the Force. And then the kid that they got to play Anakin Skywalker, which, okay. I remember the first time I saw him was in Jingle All the Way. He was just being a kid, and I'm not going to fault child actors because not every child actor in the world is going to be a thespian at that young of an age, unless you're a prodigy. But man, watching him again on Phantom Menace, he's just like, okay, alright, what? No way. That's mostly how he was in this movie.
Yeah.
He's like, I want you to say this, and I want you to try your best emotional or your best this, and it doesn't work. Really doesn't
and there's
work.
Nothing remotely believable about the stuff that he does in the movie.
Yeah. Another negative is that this movie, I mean, it kind of starts to do away with what made the original special. When they throw in the midichlorian aspect, it's just like, wait, what? What's a midichlorian? I never really got the whole midichlorian thing. It's like, he's got the highest midichlorian count that I've ever seen. Higher than Yoda's. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does a midichlorian count have to do with the Force? It just kind of takes the specialness away from the mythology that the original built. Even though the prequels do have their own setup of the Star Wars mythology, but that little aspect is just like, story-wise, it just doesn't work. It really kind of limits how far the thing of the Force, the dark side, the Jedi, it just limits itself to just, it's just because of this scientific development. It's almost like a MacGuffin when you think about it, because they mention it once and it's never addressed ever again.
Yeah.
But there are some positives. One thing is that there is a very differential between the trilogy and the prequels, and that's the lightsaber battles. Holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
They really stepped up their game, especially when you get to the last 15 minutes with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ray Park, he did a very serviceable job. Even in the parts where he doesn't even speak much, but he's given lines, he's able to deliver them as good as he can. And
they dubbed his voice, too.
Exactly. And it feels like, you know what? Even with all that makeup on, at least he's doing his best, because really they're only using him for his stunt ability, for his stunt coordination, and for him being able to. Here, we're gonna give you a stick. You're gonna fight these two. You're gonna train them too, and then we're gonna shoot in the next 3 months.
Well, yeah, one of the reasons they cast him is because they figured that if they had an actual stunt person playing the role, then that would kind of get Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor to kind of up their game, so they could get in a lot more close-up shots rather than having to swap out for stunt guys all the time.
Even though when you look at the behind the scenes, sometimes they had to CGI a few of the faces. I mean, they did the same thing with Christopher Lee, and in the final battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi, when in Revenge of the Sith. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. Ewan McGregor, he did his best. What was the actor? I keep forgetting his name off the tip of my tongue. The original actor of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Alec Guinness.
Alec Guinness. He does a great impersonation of Alec Guinness. That calm but still learning character of the series. I really can't say anything positive about Natalie Portman. Not at all. I mean, fine actress, but in this movie, she's just.
Well, it's what you're given to work with, and the fact that your director isn't working with you.
Yeah, so not really a fault on her. It's just that I'm sorry. There's really nothing good to say about the execution here. I will, however, give props to Ian McDiarmid. I mean, he's having the time of his life as Palpatine and cloaked in as the Lord of the Sith. And I really like how, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I really enjoy how Palpatine and Sidious, everything, all those chess pieces, operating on both sides, getting all these star systems together so that he can have complete control. And nobody knows it's happening, even though everything points to there's a veil of darkness here, but it's too shrouded in the war that's about to break. I mean, that's how I always saw it. It's just like they're all focused on looking for it. They can't even, there was never a real focus of anyone trying to find where the dark side was, because they were all like, they were practically chickens without heads running around. It's like, where's the freaking Sith? Where's the Lord?
The same thing is when when the Jedi are like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely a Sith Lord, and they're not even the least bit concerned as to why why the Sith would participate in such a pathetic scheme as taking over some backwater planet. It's like, oh yeah, we'll just kind of deal with it later, whatever,
Mm-hmm. I really can't say anything else for the Phantom Menace. The visuals don't hold up at all. Maybe it's just how it appeared on my screen watching it again, but they don't look like they've aged well. I really didn't care about the pod racing scenes. I really didn't. I mean, it was cool at first, but after a while, it's just like, this serves nothing for the series. The only thing is that it's there to sell toys, the video game that came after, and just to show that Anakin Skywalker is a skilled pilot, which carries on throughout the entire franchise, especially when you go to episode 4 and you see Darth Vader in his TIE fighter taking out the X-Wings and all that stuff. Other than that, that's pretty much it. It's really a shame that Darth Maul never became that central Sith apprentice or Sith Lord for the next 2 movies. I mean, granted, we do get to see him fleshed out in the Clone Wars, but it's not in the pantheon of the movies, which is, again, it goes to a real shame. But we'll get more into that. Anything else you want to add to The Phantom Menace?
Not really, just John Williams' score. Amazing.
Yeah, the Duel of Fates track.
Yeah.
Which, I didn't know this, but I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about when they released the soundtrack for The Phantom Menace before the movie came out, and it said right there behind the disc, the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, or Qui-Gon dies, or something like that. And it's like, spoiler alert. But that was, 1999, so, people didn't really know how, it was the starting of the digital age. Everybody is now very tight-lipped about things like this. Final thoughts for me is that not the best. It has some cool elements, but that's pretty much it. And I'm not even gonna rate this. The comments speak for itself. Just how I feel about this movie. There's really no need to rate it. I mean, the general consensus of the 5 to 6 out of 10. So make that of what you will.
Right. Ditto.
Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in our review of Attack of the Clones. Bye bye.